I stood frozen in the attic, my hands trembling as I held the faded envelope. The familiar scrawl of Ben's handwriting stared back at me, but the words inside shattered everything I thought I knew about our life together. "Mom?" Hannah's voice floated up from downstairs. "Where are you?" I quickly stuffed the letter into my pocket, my heart racing. "Up here, honey. Just looking through some old things." Footsteps creaked on the stairs, and Hannah's head poked through the attic opening. "Everything okay? You've been up here for hours." I forced a smile, hoping it didn't look as strained as it felt. "Of course, dear. Just got lost in memories. You know how it is." Hannah climbed fully into the attic, her eyes scanning the dusty boxes and trunks. "Dad's stuff?" I nodded, unable to trust my voice. Ben had been gone for 2 years, but the pain of his loss still felt fresh. Now with this letter. "Mom, what's wrong?" Hannah asked, her eyes filled with concern. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I took a deep breath. "It's this letter," I said, my voice trembling. "Your father, he had another son." Hannah's face went pale. "What? That's impossible. Dad would never." "I thought so too," I interrupted, pulling out the letter, "but it's all here, in his own words. A boy named Daniel, from before we were married. He'd be in his 30s now." Hannah snatched the letter from my hands, her eyes scanning the words frantically. "This can't be real. It has to be some kind of mistake." "It's not," I said softly. "I remember now little things that didn't make sense at the time. Phone calls he'd taken private, mysterious trips out of town." Hannah crumpled the letter in her fist. "So what, our whole life was a lie? Everything Dad taught us about honesty and family, it was all bullshit?" "Hannah, please," I said, reaching for her. "Your father loved us. This doesn't change that." She jerked away from me. "How can you say that? He lied to us for decades. And now you're just going to defend him?" "I'm not defending anyone," I said, my own anger rising. "I'm just as shocked as you are. But we need to think about what this means for our family now." Hannah laughed bitterly. "What family? The one Dad lied to, or the secret one he kept hidden?" Before I could respond, Mark's voice called from downstairs. "Mom? Hannah? You up there?" Hannah's eyes widened in panic. "Don't tell him," she hissed. "Not yet. I can't deal with this right now." I nodded, understanding her need for time to process. "We'll talk more later," I whispered as Mark's footsteps approached. "Hey, what's going on?" Mark asked, poking his head into the attic. "Family meeting in the dust?" I forced a laugh. "Just reminiscing. Your sister was helping me sort through some of your father's things." Mark's face softened. "Oh, find anything interesting?" Hannah and I exchanged a quick glance. "Nothing earth-shattering," I lied, feeling the weight of the secret already. "Well, come on down," Mark said. "I picked up dinner on the way over. We can eat and catch up." As we made our way downstairs, my mind raced. How could I keep this from Mark? How would this secret affect our family? And what about Daniel? Did he even know about us? At the dining table, surrounded by my children, I felt the familiar comfort of family. But now there was an undercurrent of tension, a secret threatening to tear us apart. "So, Hannah," Mark said between bites, "how are things with Eric? You two worked everything out." Hannah's fork clattered to her plate. I don't want to talk about it." I saw the pain in her eyes, remembering her recent struggles with her husband's infidelity. Now, with her father's betrayal fresh in her mind, I could only imagine the turmoil she was feeling. "Hannah, honey," I started, reaching for her hand. She jerked away, standing abruptly. "I have to go. I can't be here right now." As she rushed out, leaving Mark confused and me heartsick, I realized our family would never be the same. The letter in my pocket felt like it weighed a ton, and I knew the worst was yet to come. My hands shook as I stirred sugar into my coffee, watching the door of the small cafe. Any moment now, I'd come face to face with the living proof of Ben's betrayal. Daniel, my husband's secret son. The bell above the door chimed, and a young man walked in, his eyes scanning the room. My breath caught in my throat. He looked so much like Ben, it was uncanny. Our eyes met, and he hesitated before approaching my table. I stood, my legs unsteady. "You must be Daniel," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm Rachel, Ben's wife." Daniel stiffened, his eyes narrowing in suspicion. "Wife? I don't understand. My father wasn't married." We sat down, the tension palpable between us. I clasped my hands tightly, trying to steady myself. "I'm afraid there's a lot you don't know, Daniel, and a lot I've only recently discovered myself." his jaw clenched. What are you talking about? Who are you really? I pulled out the letter, sliding it across the table. This explains everything. I found it in Ben's things after he passed away 2 years ago. Daniel's hands trembled as he read, his face growing paler with each line. When he finished, he looked up at me, his eyes filled with a mix of anger and confusion. This can't be true. My father, he wouldn't have abandoned me like this. I'm so sorry, Daniel, I said, reaching out to touch his hand. He jerked away as if burned. Don't, he snapped. You don't get to comfort me. You had him for years, you and your other children. The bitterness in his voice stung. We didn't know about you either, Daniel. This is a shock for all of us. He laughed humorlessly. A shock? My entire life has been a lie. And now you show up, expecting what? That we'll be one big happy family? I shook my head. No, I don't expect anything. I thought you deserved to know the truth. Daniel stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. The truth? The truth is that my father was a liar and a coward, and you're just the messenger of his betrayal. As he stormed out, I felt the eyes of other patrons on me. Whispers and curious glances made my cheeks burn with shame. This wasn't how I'd imagined our meeting would go. My phone buzzed insistently. Hannah's name flashed on the screen. With a heavy sigh, I answered. Mom, where are you? I've been trying to reach you all morning. Hannah's voice was tight with worry and lingering anger. I'm out, honey. I had an errand to run. An errand? Mom, we need to talk about this. About him. I closed my eyes, dreading the conversation to come. I know, sweetheart. I'll be home soon, and we can discuss everything. Everything? Hannah's voice cracked. Like how Dad lied to us our entire lives? Or how you're suddenly okay with it? Hannah, please, it's not that simple. It is that simple, Mom. Dad cheated, had another kid, and lied about it, and now you want us to what? Welcome this stranger into our family? I felt a headache building behind my eyes. We'll talk when I get home. I promise. As I hung up, I noticed Daniel lingering outside the cafe, staring at me through the window. Our eyes met, and for a moment I saw a flicker of something, longing perhaps, before he turned and walked away. I gathered my things, my mind reeling. How could I bridge the gap between my children and this young man who wasn't such a victim as they were? And how could I reconcile the man I thought I knew with the secrets he'd kept? As I stepped outside, the weight of responsibility settled heavily on my shoulders. I had to find a way to bring this fractured family together, even if it meant facing painful truths and long-buried secrets. The road ahead would be difficult, but I was determined to see it through. For Ben, for our children, and for the son he never knew. I took a deep breath before opening the front door, bracing myself for the storm I knew was waiting inside. Hannah's car was in the driveway, and I could hear raised voices even before I stepped into the house. How could you keep this from us, Mom? Hannah's voice cracked with anger and hurt. We had a right to know. I walked into the living room to find Hannah pacing, her face flushed, while Mark sat on the couch, his head in his hands. The tension in the air was palpable. I'm sorry, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I was trying to process it myself before. Before what? Hannah interrupted. Before dropping this bomb on us? Another brother? How could Dad hide this from us? Her voice cracked, and I could see the tears welling up in her eyes. I can't handle another betrayal right now. Mark finally looked up, his expression a mix of confusion and concern. Hannah, calm down. We need to approach this rationally. Rationally? Hannah scoffed. There's nothing rational about this, Mark. Our entire childhood was built on a lie. I stepped forward, reaching out to my daughter. Hannah, sweetheart, please. Your father loved you both very much. This doesn't change that. She jerked away from my touch. Doesn't it? He had a whole other life, Mom, a son he never told us about. How can you defend him? I'm not defending anyone, I said, feeling my own emotions rising. I'm just as shocked as you are, but we need to figure out how to move forward. Mark stood up, always the peacemaker. Mom's right, we can't change the past, but we can decide how to handle this now. Have you met him, Daniel? I nodded, feeling a lump form in my throat. Yes, this morning. He didn't know about us either. He's struggling with this just as much as we are. Hannah laughed bitterly. Oh, poor him. Welcome to the club of Dad's lies and disappointments. That's not fair, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. Daniel is as much a victim in this as we are. He grew up without a father, never knowing why he was abandoned. So what? We're supposed to welcome him with open arms? Hannah's voice dripped with sarcasm. One big happy family? Mark intervened, his voice calm but firm. No one's saying that, Hannah. But we can't just ignore his existence either. He's our brother, whether we like it or not. Hannah's phone buzzed, and she glanced at it, her face darkening. I have to go. Eric's waiting for me. As she grabbed her purse, I couldn't help but notice the tension in her shoulders, the way her hand shook slightly. Hannah, is everything okay with you and Eric? She paused at the door, not turning to face us. Everything's fine, Mom, just peachy. One big happy family, remember? The door slammed behind her, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. Mark sighed, running a hand through his hair. Well, that went about as well as expected. I sank onto the couch, suddenly feeling every one of my 63 years. I don't know what to do, Mark. How do we move forward from this? He sat next to me, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. One day at a time, Mom, we'll figure it out together. As we sat there, the weight of our new reality settling around us, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Rachel, it's Daniel. I've been thinking about our meeting. Can we talk again? There's so much I need to know. I showed the message to Mark, my heart racing. He nodded slowly. You should meet him again. Maybe I could come too? As I typed out a response, agreeing to another meeting, I couldn't shake the feeling that our lives were about to change irrevocably. The secrets of the past were unraveling, and I feared what other truths might come to light. But as I looked at Mark, saw the determination in his eyes, I felt a glimmer of hope. Whatever came next, we would face it as a family, no matter how complicated that family might become. I never imagined I'd be standing in my own kitchen, feeling like a stranger in my home. But here I was, watching Daniel, my late husband's secret son, fumble with the coffee maker, his presence a constant reminder of how quickly life can change. I'm sorry, Daniel muttered, his frustration evident. I'm not used to fancy machines like this. I stepped forward, gently nudging him aside. Here, let me show you. As I demonstrated how to use the coffee maker, I couldn't help but notice how much his mannerisms resembled Ben's. It was like seeing a ghost. The front door slammed, making us both jump. Hannah stormed into the kitchen, her eyes blazing when she saw Daniel. What's he doing here? She demanded, glaring at me. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. Daniel's apartment flooded. He needs a place to stay for a few weeks, and I offered our guest room. Hannah's face contorted with anger and disbelief. You've got to be kidding me. Mom, how could you? Hannah, please, I started, but she cut me off. No, you don't get to Hannah, please me. Not about this. She turned to Daniel, her voice dripping with venom. You're not even a real part of this family. You're just a mistake from Dad's past. Daniel flinched as if he'd been slapped. I saw a flicker of hurt in his eyes before he masked it with indifference. Hannah, I exclaimed, shocked by her cruelty. That's enough. Daniel is your brother, whether you like it or not. He is not my brother, Hannah spat. And you, she pointed at me, her finger shaking, you're betraying Dad's memory by letting him stay here. The accusation hit me like a physical blow. That's not fair, Hannah. Your father. My father was a liar, she interrupted, and now you're carrying on his legacy of deceit. Before I could respond, Mark walked in, stopping short when he sensed the tension. What's going on? Hannah laughed bitterly. Oh, nothing much. Mom's just invited our bastard brother to live with her. One big happy family, right? Mark's eyes widened. Daniel's staying here? I nodded, feeling overwhelmed. It's temporary. His apartment. I don't care about his apartment, Hannah interjected. I care about you choosing him over us. I'm not choosing anyone, I said, my voice rising. I'm trying to do the right thing. The right thing? Hannah scoffed. The right thing would have been telling us the truth from the beginning, but I guess the apple doesn't fall far from the tree when it comes to keeping secrets. Her words stung, bringing tears to my eyes. Hannah, that's enough. I know you're hurting. But you don't know anything, she said, her voice breaking. You have no idea what I'm going through. With that, she stormed out, leaving a heavy silence in her wake. Mark sighed, running a hand through his hair. I'll go talk to her. He gave Daniel an apologetic look before following Hannah. I turned to Daniel, who looked uncomfortable and out of place. I'm so sorry about that. Hannah's going through a difficult time, and— It's okay, he interrupted, his voice soft. Maybe this was a mistake. I should go. As he moved to leave, I felt a surge of determination. No, Daniel, please stay. We can't keep running from this. We're family, and it's time we started acting like it. He hesitated, studying my face. Are you sure? I don't want to cause more problems. I took his hand, squeezing it gently. I'm sure. It won't be easy, but we'll figure this out together. As Daniel nodded, accepting my offer, I realized I'd made a decision that would change everything. By choosing to embrace Daniel as part of our family, I was opening the door to more conflict, more pain, but also the possibility of healing and growth. Looking at Daniel's grateful expression, I knew I'd made the right choice, even if it meant facing Hannah's wrath and navigating the complicated emotions that came with integrating a long-lost family member. Whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them as a family. A new, expanded, and admittedly fractured family, but a family nonetheless. The tension in the house was palpable as I prepared dinner, the clatter of pots and pans doing little to drown out the silence between Daniel and Hannah. Mark had come over, ostensibly to help with the meal, but I knew he was here to play peacekeeper. Hannah, could you set the table? I asked, hoping to involve her in some way. She rolled her eyes but complied, slamming drawers as she gathered silverware. Daniel winced at each loud noise, his discomfort evident. Mark cleared his throat. So, Daniel, what do you do for work? Before Daniel could answer, Hannah interjected, Why bother asking? He'll probably just lie like Dad did. Hannah, I snapped, my patience wearing thin. That's enough. Mark stepped between them, his voice calm but firm. I don't like this any more than you do, he said to Daniel, but we're family now. We have to make this work. Daniel offered a reluctant nod, and for a moment I saw a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could find a way through this. But then Hannah's phone buzzed, and her face darkened as she read the message. Without a word, she grabbed her keys and headed for the door. Hannah, where are you going? I called after her. Out, she replied curtly. Don't wait up. As the door slammed behind her, I felt a knot of worry form in my stomach. Something was wrong, beyond just the tension with Daniel. Mark sighed, running a hand through his hair. I'll go after her, make sure she's okay. I nodded gratefully, watching as he left. Alone with Daniel, I felt the weight of everything pressing down on me. I'm sorry, Daniel said softly. I never meant to cause so much trouble. I turned to him, seeing the genuine remorse in his eyes. It's not your fault, Daniel. This situation, it's complicated for all of us. As we finished preparing dinner in silence, my mind raced. How could I bridge the gap between my children and this young man who was as much a victim of circumstances as they were? Just as we were sitting down to eat, my phone rang. It was Mark. Mom. His voice was tight with worry. I followed Hannah. She's outside Eric's office, and I think she's spying on him. My heart sank. What? Why would she? I don't know, but she looks upset. I think she suspects he's cheating again. The pieces suddenly fell into place. Hannah's erratic behavior, her increased hostility, the secretive phone calls. How had I missed the signs? I'm coming, I said, already reaching for my keys. Stay with her, Mark. Don't let her do anything rash. I turned to Daniel, who looked concerned and confused. I have to go. Hannah's in trouble. Will you be okay here? He nodded, understanding in his eyes. Go. Take care of her. As I drove through the darkening streets, my mind whirled with possibilities. If Eric was indeed cheating again, it would devastate Hannah. And in her current state, with all the family drama, I feared what she might do. I spotted Mark's car first, then saw Hannah crouched behind a hedge, her eyes fixed on the building across the street. As I approached, I saw Eric emerge with a young woman, their body language intimate and familiar. Hannah's face contorted with rage and pain. She started to move, but I grabbed her arm. Let me go, she hissed. I'm going to show that lying bastard exactly what he's losing. Hannah, stop, I pleaded. This isn't the way. She turned to me, tears streaming down her face. Then what is, Mom? How do I make this pain stop? Dad lied, Eric lied, everyone lies. In that moment, looking at my broken, angry daughter, I realized the true cost of secrets and betrayal. It wasn't just about Ben's past or Daniel's presence. It was about trust, about the very foundation of our family. I pulled Hannah into a tight embrace, feeling her resistance melt as she sobbed against my shoulder. Over her head, I met Mark's worried gaze, and beyond him, I saw Daniel approaching cautiously, having followed us out of concern. In that moment, I knew I had to make a choice. We couldn't go on like this, tearing each other apart. Something had to change, and it had to start with me. "We're going home," I said firmly. "All of us. It's time we faced the truth. All of it together." As we walked back to our cars, I felt the weight of the decision I'd just made. The road ahead would be difficult, but it was the only way forward. It was time to confront our past, heal our present, and forge a new future. As a family, I stood in my kitchen, surrounded by the chaos of last-minute preparations for our family gathering. The air was thick with tension, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to explode. Hannah burst through the door, her eyes wild and her hair disheveled. "Mom, I need to talk to you. Now." I set down the platter I was holding, my heart racing. "What's wrong, sweetie?" She glanced around nervously, then lowered her voice. "I have proof. Eric's been cheating on me again. I'm going to expose him tonight in front of everyone." My blood ran cold. "Hannah, no, this isn't the way to handle it. Let's talk about this." "Talk?" she scoffed. "That's all we ever do. Talk and pretend everything's fine." "Well, I'm done pretending." Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. Guests were arriving. The next hour was a blur of greetings and forced smiles. I watched Hannah like a hawk, terrified of what she might do. Daniel hovered awkwardly on the periphery, while Mark tried his best to keep conversations flowing. Eric arrived late, looking nervous. Hannah's eyes locked onto him, and I saw a dangerous glint in them. As everyone gathered in the living room, I cleared my throat. "Thank you all for coming. I know it's been a difficult time for our family, but I hoped we could use this opportunity to—" "Oh, cut the crap, Mom," Hannah interrupted, standing up. "You want to talk about difficult times? Let's talk about how my husband has been screwing his secretary for months." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Eric paled, stammering, "Hannah, what are you?" "You thought you could get away with this?" Hannah yelled, throwing a file of incriminating photos across the room. "Everyone will know who you really are." The room erupted into chaos. Eric lunged for the photos, guests murmured in shock, and I stood frozen, watching my carefully orchestrated evening crumble. "Hannah, please," I begged, finding my voice. "This isn't the time or place." "When is the time, Mom?" she screamed, tears streaming down her face. "When Dad was alive and lying to us? Or now, when his bastard son is living in our house like nothing happened?" Daniel flinched at her words, and I saw Mark step protectively in front of him. "That's enough," I shouted, surprising even myself with the force of my voice. "Everyone, please, just calm down." But it was too late. The dam had broken, and years of pent-up resentment and secrets came flooding out. "You knew, didn't you?" Hannah accused, turning on me. "You knew about Dad's affair, about Daniel, and you never said a word." "I didn't know," I protested weakly, but doubt gnawed at me. Had there been signs I'd ignored? Eric, seeing an opportunity to deflect, jumped in. "This is rich coming from you, Hannah. You want to talk about affairs? Why don't you tell everyone about your little fling with your college professor last year?" The room fell silent, all eyes turning to Hannah. She looked like she'd been slapped. "Is that true?" I whispered, feeling like the ground was crumbling beneath my feet. Hannah's face crumpled. I was lonely. Eric was always working, and... So it's my fault?" Eric sneered. "You're no better than me, Hannah. No better than your father." "Don't you dare compare me to him!" Hannah screamed, lunging at Eric. Mark intercepted her, holding her back. "Hannah, stop! This isn't solving anything." As I watched my children grapple with each other, surrounded by the shocked faces of our friends and family, I felt something inside me break. This was my fault. I'd let secrets fester, ignored the signs of trouble, all in the name of keeping the peace. Enough. The voice that cut through the chaos wasn't mine. It was Daniel's. He stood in the center of the room, his face a mix of anger and determination. "Look at yourselves. You're tearing each other apart over lies and betrayals. Is this what family means to you?" His words hung in the air, heavy with truth. I looked around the room, at the hurt and angry faces of my children, at the strangers who were supposed to be family, and I realized we'd reached a breaking point. In that moment, I knew I had a choice to make. I could let this destroy us, or I could find a way to bring us back together. But as Hannah's sobs echoed through the room and Eric stormed out, slamming the door behind him, I wondered if it was already too late. The aftermath of Hannah's revelation left our family in shambles. Guests had hurriedly departed, leaving behind a deafening silence punctuated only by Hannah's muffled sobs from upstairs. I stood in the wreckage of our living room, shattered glass and scattered photos at my feet, feeling utterly lost. Mark approached me, his face etched with concern. "Mom, what do we do now?" Before I could answer, Daniel's voice cut through the tension. "We need to talk. All of us. No more secrets, no more lies." I nodded, feeling a mix of dread and relief. "You're right. Hannah!" I called up the stairs. "Please come down. We need to sort this out." Moments later, Hannah appeared, her eyes red and puffy. She glared at Daniel but said nothing as she took a seat. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "All right, it's time we face the truth, all of it. No more hiding, no more pretending." "What's there to say?" Hannah spat. "Dad was a liar, Eric's a cheater, and you," she pointed at me, "you've been keeping secrets too. Our whole family is built on lies." "That's not fair," Mark interjected. "Mom didn't know about Daniel any more than we did." "Didn't she?" Hannah's eyes narrowed. "Are you sure about that, Mom? You never suspected anything." I felt my chest tighten. I had my suspicions over the years, but I chose to trust your father. Maybe that was a mistake." "A mistake?" Hannah laughed bitterly. "That's an understatement." "And what about you, Hannah?" Mark challenged. "You're not innocent in all this either. Eric mentioned your affair." "That was different," Hannah shouted, jumping to her feet. "I was lonely, and Eric was always." "Enough!" Daniel's voice boomed, silencing us all. He stood, his eyes blazing with a mix of anger and determination. "Listen to yourselves. You're so caught up in pointing fingers and assigning blame that you can't see what you're doing to each other, to this family." We all stared at him, stunned by his outburst. "You think you're the only ones hurt by all this?" Daniel continued, his voice breaking. "I grew up without a father, never knowing why I was abandoned. And now I find out I have a whole family who sees me as nothing but a reminder of betrayal." His words hit me like a physical blow. I'd been so focused on my own pain, on protecting Hannah and Mark, that I'd neglected to truly see Daniel's suffering. "We're destroying ourselves over secrets and lies," Daniel said, his voice softer now. "This family can't heal unless we face the truth, all of it." The room fell silent as his words sank in. I looked at my children, at all three of my children, and saw the pain, anger, and fear etched on their faces. "Daniel's right," I said, my voice trembling. "We've all made mistakes, we've all kept secrets, but if we want to move forward, we need to lay everything out in the open." Hannah scoffed. "And then what? We just forgive and forget?" "No," I said firmly. "We acknowledge the hurt, we take responsibility for our actions, and we decide if we want to rebuild this family together." Mark nodded slowly. "I'm willing to try if you all are." Hannah remained silent, her arms crossed tightly across her chest. "Hannah?" I prompted gently. She looked up, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know if I can. It hurts too much." I moved to her, taking her hands in mine. "I know, sweetheart, but we're family. We can get through this if we stick together." For a moment, I thought she might pull away, but then she collapsed into my arms, sobbing. I held her tightly, feeling my own tears start to fall. As I embraced my daughter, I caught Daniel's eye over her shoulder. He stood awkwardly to the side, uncertainty written across his face. I extended my hand to him, inviting him into our circle. Hesitantly, he stepped forward and Mark moved to include him. For the first time since this all began, I felt a glimmer of hope. We were broken, battered by secrets and lies, but we were together. As we stood there, holding on to each other, I realized this was just the beginning. We had a long, difficult road ahead of us, but for the first time I believed we might actually make it through, as a family. The weeks following our confrontation were a delicate dance of healing and hurt. Each day brought new challenges but also small victories. I watched my family, once fractured, slowly begin to mend. Hannah was the first to take a concrete step. One morning, she approached me, her eyes red-rimmed but determined. "Mom, I think I need help, professional help." I felt a surge of pride and relief. "That's very brave of you, sweetheart. I'll help you find someone." As Hannah started therapy, I noticed subtle changes. The sharp edges of her anger began to soften, replaced by a quiet introspection. She and Eric had decided to separate. But for the first time, I saw her facing the future with strength rather than bitterness. Mark threw himself into work, but also made time for Daniel. I'd catch them talking late into the night, their voices low and earnest. Slowly, a tentative brotherhood began to form. Daniel remained a constant presence, his quiet determination to be part of the family, both heartwarming and heartbreaking. I found myself drawn to him, seeing echoes of Ben in his mannerisms and smile. One evening, as we all gathered for dinner, a new weekly tradition we'd started, I looked around the table and felt a wave of emotion wash over me. We'd been through hell, but here we were, still standing, still trying. "I have something to say," I began, my voice trembling slightly. All eyes turned to me. "We've been through hell, but we have to find a way to rebuild. Family means forgiveness and growth." Hannah nodded slowly. "I'm trying, Mom. It's not easy, but I'm trying." "We all are," Mark added, glancing at Daniel. Daniel cleared his throat. "I know I'm still new to all of this, but thank you for giving me a chance to be part of this family." I reached out, taking Daniel's hand in mine. "You've always been part of this family, Daniel. We just didn't know it yet." Hannah hesitated, then extended her hand to Daniel as well. "I'm sorry for how I treated you before. You didn't deserve that." As Daniel took Hannah's hand, I felt tears spring to my eyes. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. "I have an idea," Mark said suddenly. "Why don't we go through Dad's old things together? Maybe we can all learn more about him, the good and the bad." The suggestion hung in the air for a moment. Then, to my surprise, Hannah nodded. "I'd like that." We spent the rest of the evening in the attic, sifting through boxes of Ben's belongings. There were moments of laughter as we uncovered old photographs and mementos, and moments of tension as we confronted reminders of his secrets. As I watched my children, all three of them, piece together the complex puzzle of their father, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. We weren't hiding anymore. We were facing our past, together. "Mom, look at this," Daniel said softly, holding out a small notebook. It was Ben's journal from the year Daniel was born. With shaking hands, I opened it. Ben's familiar handwriting filled the pages, detailing his struggles, his regrets, and his love for all his children, including Daniel. He wanted to tell us, I realized, my voice barely a whisper. He was trying to find a way. We huddled together, reading Ben's words. There were tears and angry outbursts, but also moments of understanding and forgiveness. As the night wore on, I looked at my family, battered and bruised, but healing. We had a long way to go, but for the first time, I truly believed we would make it. "We've been through hell," I said, echoing my words from earlier, "but we're finding our way back. Together." Hannah leaned her head on my shoulder while Mark and Daniel exchanged a look of newfound brotherhood. In that moment, I felt Ben's presence, not as a source of betrayal, but as a reminder of the love that had brought us all together. We were a family redefined, shaped by secrets and lies, but ultimately bound by love and the choice to forgive. As we descended from the attic, arms linked and hearts lighter, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them as one. The path to healing was long, but we had taken the first steps together. And in the end, that's what family is all about.